the child is made to feel responsible for the abuse.
The one thing I think that stayed with me as a child and through most of my adult life was the fact that I never talked about it, never shared it, and I think it added to a lot of my problems. Shyness, very low self-esteem, a lot of times feeling whatever was going wrong was my fault. All these things, I realized later on, were all related to the fact that I was harboring all these emotions that I never allowed anybody to share with me.
I know that there are organizations who are out there and advocates who are supporting each other. I'm more action-oriented, and I can't settle down, and it's the only way I think that I can even find healing, even though you can't be healed until you're on the other side of the fence. It's a way of keeping me going, is doing something. And,
Mothers are never prepared for their children to disclose sexual abuse. And when my children disclosed, I didn't want to believe it, but I didn't know what to do either. And I was in the midst of a divorce, and the children had only that 1 week begun to see their father alone when we had separated, and that's when they came home, and one of them was in serious pain, and she was quite inflamed in her vaginal area. And so when you start going through the battles, it's number one, you don't know what to do. I turned to my attorney, and I was given very, very bad advice. I turned to the courts through my attorney, and I found that the more my children disclosed, the more the court didn't want to believe that my children had been abused. They believed their father instead, and they took the children away from me totally. It's been 4 years and 3 months since I've even seen my children.
There is always the dilemma as to whether this is child abuse is an actual event as being reported by the mother. So on the one hand, if the mother allows it, they'll say, well, she is a neglectful mother and take the child away because you neglected to protect. And on the other hand, all too often, the mother says, especially after a divorce, a separation or a divorce, where the mother is now able to see things that she didn't realize that were going on, like child sexual abuse, on behalf of the perpetrated by the ex-husband. Now she's able to see these symptoms.
Well, clearly my daughter has been abused, and it's all documented, and she wrote a lot of letters to the judge by herself and tell the abuse, and the judge, actually that made the judge very upset, and the judge thought that my daughter directly challenged him. So he not only gave the sole custody to my ex-husband, also put me back to supervise the visitation 4 hours once a month. And after that, I just collapsed, and I just couldn't hold together, even though I know I have all the truth, but just too overwhelmed.
My sister has been extremely, extremely heartbroken over this matter. The fact that she's been taken away from her family. She's always been there to see the conflict between my parents. She's always been there to see the abuse that my father has really subjected his family to. So she's always been there first-handedly seeing what's going on. It's tragic, I'd say, that she is forced to go live with the same person she suffered at the hands of.
I told my daughter that she was gonna stay with Dad and only come back in a weekend to see Mom and her brother, and she was just devastated. And she also, at that point, reviewed to her therapist that her father molested her for probably 4 or 5 years. He been talk her every night, and she said that's when did that happen for all these years. So I called CPS, and the therapist of my daughter called CPS. I filed a report to the police department. Then we filed a reconsideration with this new evidence.
That if he is in fact molesting her, and she's having all this upset, and she's pulling out of her eyebrows, and she doesn't know what to do because she's lived with him in the past and has seen his violence, that when he tells her he's going to be getting custody of her, she finally reveals what he has been doing to her. And the response to that is for her to be given to him and completely separated from her mother, completely. Birthday, Christmas, no contact whatsoever, to be isolated from her brother. And his motivation is clear. He has got to keep her quiet. And that's what this is all about.
There is no change of circumstances presented in the current motion. In effect, this is a second bite of the apple.
Commissioner basically said the sexual abuse allegation is suspicious because the time-wise, and why didn't child review this before?
The motion is denied.
There are quite a number of cases in which a battering man also sexually abuses children. There's a high overlap between domestic violence perpetration and incest perpetration, statistically speaking. And I've seen the anguish of mothers whose children are being sexually abused and where the court refused to permit her to protect her children.
My daughter called me the first night after she went to her father's house. She talked to me 5 times on her cellular phone.
Nadia, sweetie, give me some time, okay? Give me some time. I need some time to have a look. Today, Nadia, today, okay? Are they threatening you on anything? No. Okay, Nadia, hang on there. Hang on there, okay, Nadia? Let me work on it, okay? What? I can't hear you. Talk a little louder. You don't care you gotta bring your where? I don't care. I do the water. Okay, Tanya, just listen. Hang on there now. Don't go anywhere, okay? Hang on there, sweetie. Give me some time to work it, okay? Get me out. I love you, sweetie. I'm working you out there. Okay, Manya, hang on there. You're fine, Manya. You know what, Manya? I know you're not fine. But, Manya, deep breath.
Young people that we have here who have lived exposed to the behavior of batterers, who know firsthand what happens to children from having a batterer present in the home. Go ahead.
My name is Jeff Hoverson. I'm with the Courageous Kids Network. It's part of the California Protective Parents Association. And I know many of you are in this battle. Many of you maybe might be therapists or whatever. But your kids, if they need somebody to talk to, I know when we were going through this, before we were all rescued, we were able to talk to each other. And it was the most helpful thing to know that another kid was going through the same thing. The room I slept in was directly across from my sister's, and he would go in there and spend I don't know, well into the night. I was young, but I had a concept of time, and I knew it was at least 3 hours that he would be in there. And I couldn't imagine what else he'd be doing other than what I had heard from the interviews, because my sisters had said, that's exactly when it happened. And I was so young, there's nothing I was going to do. I was so afraid to walk into the other room and see that he was, touching them and stuff. It's the most helpless feeling.
About a year, maybe a year and a half after we split up in 1993, my oldest daughter, who was about 5 then, started acting out sexually on her younger sister. And that went on for quite a while. And, you know, I didn't know what was going on, but something didn't seem right. And so eventually, my oldest daughter started actually disclosing things like that her father was getting in the shower with her and sleeping with her, and she didn't want him to, but she couldn't make him stop. First of all, when my daughters disclosed that their father was molesting them, my oldest daughter, who was 7 at the time, described him showing her child pornography and forcing her to reenact what was in the pictures. She described being raped, sodomized, and she described him kneeling over her head, and she said, "It felt like something pokey in my throat." So I knew she was telling the truth because no 7-year-old child could possibly conceive of that position and could not possibly conceive of what that would feel like. When she had a sexual assault examination at UC Davis Medical Center, it was determined that she had 3 old healed wounds and 1 fresh wound and a damaged hymen. So my ex was not indicted. I mean, he wasn't prosecuted for the molest, and everything got dealt with in family court. Cut out of their lives.
It began with the evaluator who made a report that said that my sisters were lying about my dad molesting them, and it was because of parent alienation syndrome. And so he wrote the report to the court, and they believed it because he was hired by them. And then it kept going with the lawyer who, in court, withheld all the evidence of molest.
You know, I naively thought that, you know, if somebody molests their kid, I thought they'd just go to jail. That was my impression. So I was so taken off guard by what was going on. It was like being in the twilight zone.
Mothers who allege abuse are automatically up against this defense that actually they're alienators. Then what happens is when the evaluator is brought in, or the guardian ad litem, everyone is busy investigating her for alienating. And they're looking at everything she does or says and casting it in this light of she's an alienator, she's trying to alienate the kids. And they're totally distracted from assessing whether the father is actually a risk and abuser to the children and the mother.
The court-appointed psychologist who testified to this parent alienation syndrome had never read the medical reports. He never read the police reports. He never even interviewed my children about abuse.
When an advocate raises child sexual abuse as a claim or a concern, it tends to enrage courts and evaluators and neutrals. It's the equivalent of throwing a bombshell into the courtroom. That's how it's received. It's seen as outrageous and extreme, and you're going to have to meet an extremely high burden of proof to persuade the court that it's true.
It seems to me that the whole system couldn't have cared less about my kids. They were focusing not on my kids. They were focusing on me. I became this target, and my kids' interests were completely, thrown to the side after that.
I was, I think, 7.5 or 8. I was put in the custody of my dad. I was just snatched up from my normal life and put into an alternate one. I didn't get to talk to my mom. I didn't get to go back home and get any of my stuff. And all that anyone would tell me was that my mom was crazy and that she was going into the mental hospital. We didn't see our mom for probably 2 or 3 months, I think it was. And then with the therapist, we went into a room with my mom there, and walking into that room and seeing her there was the most awkward experience I've ever had in my life, because the therapist had told us not to hug her or kiss her or talk to her about what was going on in her life, so that didn't leave very many options for what to say or do. So walking in there, seeing her and seeing her so upset, and just being so upset myself that, she was so close yet so far.